achieved.
Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson, and on this episode of the show, we're breaking down the upcoming UFC 162 main card, 5 predictions in all, including the main event title fight featuring Anderson Silva defending his middleweight title against the challenger, Chris Weidman. As I said, 5 main card predictions on the episode. All of my preliminary breakdowns will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net, so head on over there and please check them out. Also available on the site is the panel's predictions. You can go and vote on who you think is going to win each fight and see who the public's backing. The Kamikaze Overdrive Prediction Tournament, we are into round 2. This is the second event for round 2. There are 3 events in total for this round. 16 competitors left, so you can check out their picks right before the event starts if you want to follow along with somebody and see how well they're doing. And I'm coming off not a bad showing at UFC 161. I went 7-4, which doesn't sound like a great record, but considering there were how many upsets were on the main card or in the total event? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 upsets on an 11-card event. I went 7-4, and that's because I took Stipe Miocic, Jake Shields, and James Krause, who all pulled off major upsets. Then you figure in Sean Jordan and Mitch Clark pulling off upsets as well. And I was very close to having maybe a much better record, as I had Dan Henderson, who lost a slight split decision. And I also had Kenny Robertson, who I thought won the fight against Sean Pearson, or at the very least earned a draw. That was a very close fight and a little upset I was hoping to nail as well there. Either way, the bet packs for 162 will be available. $10. Head over to the bet shop, purchase them, make some money. My props have been on fire. I've been having a very successful run of late, so please invest it. If you're going to spend hundreds of bucks betting on the event, why not spend $10 more and get as much insight as you possibly can get from someone who's been doing it for so long? I'm not perfect. I never preach that, but at the same time, I've had a lot of success. I've made people a lot of money, so certainly consider spending $10 as opposed to other sites that charge you $50 and $60. That's a lot of talk from me. As always, thank you very much to all of my sponsors, MMA Crips, to name one of them, MMABettingOdds.com. Just to name a few. Their links are all available in the description for the video or on the website under the partners side of the website. And that's a lot of talking for me. We got 5 predictions. Let's get to the first one. Our opening prediction of the evening comes in the UFC's featherweight division is 19-5-0 Cub Swanson battles 21-8-0 Dennis Siver. Swanson's on a 4-fight winning streak, and Siver has won 6 of 7, including both fights at featherweight since making the cut down. Now, physically, the height and reach are very similar, but Siver looks like the thicker man. Actually, height and reach are exactly the same, but I said Siver is the bigger man. He's more muscular, and I think that'll show up in the strength battles when these guys clinch up and potentially go to the mat. Head-to-head win-loss totals. Siver, 5 wins by knockout, 9 wins by submission, and 7 by decision. He has been submitted 5 times and knocked out just once by Melvin Gillard. Stylistically, Siver is a German kickboxing champion, Taekwondo black belt, BJJ purple belt. He has Sambo. He brings karate into his game. He's got a multi-dimensional fight game. Lots of different disciplines he likes to incorporate. Cub Swanson, 7 wins by submission, 7 wins by knockout, and 5 decisions. He has also been submitted multiple times, 3 in fact, and his lone knockout came against the champion Jose Aldo. No shame in that. Swanson's a Greg Jackson-trained fighter, BJJ black belt, and he's really working hard in his boxing, and it's showing up. And he's been training with Timothy Bradley, the boxer, and that's going to help him certainly in this fight. Now, what Swanson likes to do, he likes to throw a lot of capoeira-style kicks, so spinning attacks, high-risk maneuvers. He has big power, as we saw him knock out Ross Pearson and George Roop recently. He likes to move around, bounce forward, use a lot of footwork, but he will take some big risks to land big shots, which, is all right, but he holds his hands very low, which I'm not overly comfortable with. He leaves a lot of openings to be countered, and he has a tendency to overextend himself, especially when he swings and misses. Now, we saw him a couple times get taken down by Ross Pearson, and in my opinion, he was losing that fight until he scored the knockout, so that's something to keep in mind here. Now, again, in the Poirier fight, he got a little bit wild and was getting taken down in that matchup, and got hurt actually late in the third round with some shots by Poirier along the cage. Now, Dennis Siver, good distance management. He uses his kicks and his jabs. He moves back very effectively as his opponent moves forward and lands counter shots with power. He has a left hook on the break from a clinch, which can do a lot of damage, and he has limited windup with his strikes, which makes it very hard to defend against those karate-style kicks. And Cub has his hands down. If he doesn't see the strikes coming, it's going to be very difficult for him to defend against them if his hands are at his side or at least hung lower than they should be. One thing Siver likes to do is he likes to fight from kicking range, and he lands those big shots still. He was easily cutting through Nam Phan's guard with his striking, and he has lots of spinning attacks that can catch guys off guard and really do damage when they land. He has an improving grappling game with that Sambo. He showed a good shot against the Pham, and he has big ground and pound when he gets on top of a guy. He's a physically strong man. Excellent takedown defense at 71%, and that was mainly against lightweights, so it should be even better here at featherweight. Now, Seaver, one big edge, he has strikes landed per minute, 4.13 compared to 3.14 for Swanson. So over a 15-round fight, he lands one more significant strike per minute. That adds up significantly, and that's certainly going to give him an edge with the judges. Now, I said Swanson likes to leave his hands down, and he's going to struggle to defend the quick and well-disguised attacks of Dennis Seaver. And his high-risk jumping attacks and spinning attacks that Cub Swanson likes to throw are going to give Seaver ample time to both counter-strike and land takedowns and score and establish top control. I think this will add up too much for Cub Swanson to overcome. And my prediction is Dennis Seaver to defeat Cub Swanson by decision. Moving right along, our next prediction is the first of two middleweight matchups, as we have Mark, the Filipino wrecking machine Munoz, 12-3, returning to action to battle Tim, the Barbarian Boetsch, 16-5-0. Munoz coming off a loss against title challenger Chris Weidman, while Tim Boetsch also had his 4-fight winning streak snapped against Costa Philippou in his last appearance. Now looking at this, Munoz is coming off a 12-month layoff, and Boetsch has been away for 7 months coming on, after his last loss. So a slight edge to Boetsch as far as ring rust is concerned, but still, both guys have been away for a little bit longer than normal, especially Munoz. Munoz is an NCAA Division I wrestler, and Boetsch is a collegiate wrestler as well out of Lockhaven University, and he's Matt Hume trained, so both guys well-versed at fighting on the ground. Now, both wrestlers could result in this being a striking battle, but I want to look at the ground games first. Munoz just one win by submission over his career, and it came by punches, so not really a submission threat. But Boetsch overall is 5-1 in fights ended by submission. Again, that goes back to him being trained by Matt Hume, the wizard on the mat, very technical on the ground. Both guys have strong ground and pound, but again, I give the edge to Munoz with what he likes to refer to as his Donkey Kong fists. We saw in that Chris Leben fight how much damage he can do from a short distance just by controlling top position. Statistically, Munoz 2.29 takedowns at 23%. Boetsch 2.14 takedowns at 36%. Neither guy shows those numbers that jump off the page at you, but don't let that fool you. They're still capable of dictating the pace with their wrestling if they choose to do so. Munoz overall had 5 takedowns versus Leben and 3 versus Damian Maia. But he has also been taken down in fights 5 times by Aaron Simpson, and in that battle against Chris Weidman, taken down twice and absolutely destroyed on the mat. Tim Boetsch, we saw him land 4 takedowns against Nick Ray, including that beautiful hip toss, and he had 7 against Kendall Grove overall, and 2 against Costa Philippou, who has excellent takedown defense, but Boetsch was still able to use his timing and showed some good wrestling early on in that fight. But Tim traditionally has had trouble with strong wrestlers. He was taken down 4 times by Jason Brills. Phil Davis gave him fits on the mat before submitting him. Matt Hamill did the same. Okami dominated him in the second round. Even Hector Lombard landed a couple of takedowns. And, he's had trouble with wrestlers. And at middleweight, Mark Munoz is the first NCAA-trained wrestler he has faced. And it'll really show up, see if these difficulties with a grappling-based opponent has followed him to 185, or if the cut and weight will help him to deal with these things. On the feet, Tim does have 7 wins by knockout compared to Mark, who has 6. And both has been stopped twice over in their career. Both actually knocked out by Matt Hamill, which is an interesting point to note. Striking stats are very close. Munoz has a slight edge in strikes landed per minute, and again, that mainly comes from the ground and pound, which will help increase those numbers. Boetsch has decent combinations, and I really like that front kick, that teep-style attack, used kind of as a jab to keep guys backed off, and we saw him knock down Costa Philippou when he landed that on the chin, so he's very strong in that sense. Now, for Munoz, he has been working to improve, and he will throw a little bit wild, but he has big power, and if he lands, he can do a lot of damage. Overall, Boetsch is going to have a 3-inch reach advantage. I think he's going to be physically, he'll be the larger man overall, which should help him. Tim has a tendency to slow down in fights, but he's still very big and strong, but he's made it very clear the cut to 185 is a difficult one, and a high, stress fight with a lot of physicality could take its toll on him. Boetsch can absorb a lot of punishment, but I really think we're still going to see Mark Munoz, despite the ring rust and the time away from the cage. He's going to look to put Boetsch on his back, drop those big shots, and I think we're going to see Mark Munoz pick up a victory in this matchup. So I'm taking Mark Munoz to defeat Tim Boetsch by decision. At the midway mark of our main card, we have a middleweight matchup. That's alliteration at its finest, folks. As Tim Kennedy, 15-4-0, battles 6-1-0 Hodger Gracie. Kennedy coming off a win over Trevor Smith, while Gracie has won back-to-back appearances. Now, these are 2 former Strikeforce fighters, and there's a big physical disparity. Gracie's a former light heavyweight. Well, as far as I'm concerned, Kennedy should be fighting at at welterweight if he can make the cut down. I think he could, and he would do much better there. Gracie's going to have a 5-inch height and a 5-inch reach advantage. We'll see if he can exploit those numbers as this fight progresses. Now, Hodger is a second-degree BJJ black belt, arguably the best grappler in all of MMA, very well decorated outside in the grappling competitions, and just he's dangerous on the ground. Not surprisingly, 5 of 6 wins have come by submission. The only guy he defeated that survived his submission game was Keith Jardine, interestingly enough. He averages 1.82 takedowns at 56% overall, and 2.54 submissions per 15 minutes on the ground. Again, most situations he only needs one opportunity to cinch up, a submission to finish the fight. Against Smith, one takedown. Trevor Prangley, the same thing. Kevin Randleman he knocked him out with a quick jab, and Jardine did get taken down 3 times, but could not get back up, and Gracie showed some solid ground and pound. Now, Hodger's not the most athletic fighter overall. He's going to look to clinch and drag Kennedy to the fight, or grab a kick and look for a takedown in that position, or probably pull guard and look for sweeps and reversals. Now Kennedy, he's also a very strong grappler. 8 wins by submission, or by submission, including his last victory. He also tapped out Melvin Manhoef and Trevor Prangley as well. He averages 2.72 takedowns at 35% and an 82% takedown defense, and that is going to be key. But he has been taken down in past fights. For example, Smith in his last fight took him down 3 times. And he struggled early in that bout until Smith gassed out. Now, Kennedy's last 3 victories prior to the Trevor Smith bout came over opponents that had submissions that count for 14 of their 27 career defeats, and only 10 of 103 of their victories. Robbie Lawler, Melvin Manhoef, and Trevor Prangley. Basically, what I'm saying here is that those opponents were tailor-made for Kennedy's style, not Hodger Gracie. Hodger Gracie much better on the ground and is going to be a huge threat. For Kennedy, he needs to use a similar game plan to what he used against Jacare, defend takedowns and use his movement and striking to attack. Souza only attempted 3 takedowns in that fight and was much more striking-centered, which Gracie will not be. Gracie's going to look for his openings to get this fight to the mat and attack submissions. As I said, Kennedy needs to keep this fight standing until he feels that Gracie's gassed enough that he could look for a takedown, but still that's very dangerous. Now, Hodger's striking is still very much a work in progress. He's been working with Blackhouse, with guys like Lyoto Machida, and at TriStar with GSP, so I expect to see some more improvement still from a guy who's a very talented, very intelligent fighter. He has a decent jab, and he has that long, uses some long-range punches, but again, he needs to be more active and keep his chin down and his hands up to avoid getting cracked with a big shot like King Mo did to him. Now, Kennedy isn't an elite-level striker by any stretch of the imagination, but he's improving. He has decent power, and he likes to attack in short bursts, which could be enough if he can land one on Gracie's chin. Now, he did a decent job in the clinch with Smith overall, using knees and some very powerful uppercuts, which could be perfect for a much taller fighter. Now, Kennedy's going to have to close the distance against Gracie, and he's going to be very careful when he gets there, because that puts him in range to be taken down. Speed and conditioning are his biggest weapons. Now, Gracie did struggle with Smith early in his fight, as he couldn't close the distance and was forced to change and attack with him. Unfortunately, Kennedy's not going to be able to fight at that range, and that's going to cost him. Hodger's only going to need one opportunity to get this fight to the ground. I think we've seen from Kennedy he can be taken down. I think Gracie will take him down. So my prediction is Hodger Gracie to defeat Tim Kennedy by submission. For our co-main event prediction, we're in the UFC's featherweight division as former UFC lightweight champion Frankie the Answer Edgar returns to action. He's 14-4-1. He battles Charles Do Bronx Oliveira, 16-3-0 with 1 no contest. Edgar's lost 3 fights in a row overall, against Benson Henderson twice and Jose Aldo, so take that into consideration before you tisk. Charles Oliveira, on the other hand, coming off a knockout loss against Cub Swanson, his first at 145 pounds. Now, Edgar hasn't won a fight since 2011 versus Gray Maynard, but again, the competition he's been facing has been elite. About as elite as anyone can say it's been. First non-title fight since 2009, where he defeated Matt Veach. That shows how, what level Frankie Edgar has been competing at recently. Now, Oliveira's coming off a knockout loss against Cub Swanson, but there was rumors of a last-minute knee injury, and that could have impacted his performance in that bout. Now, but prior to that, the Brazilian had looked fantastic at 145 with 2 submission wins. Now, as far as Frankie Edgar is concerned, the UFC is being accused of trying to get the former champion a victory. Charles Oliveira is no slouch. He's fought very good competition. As I said, Cub Swanson, Donald Cerrone, Jim Miller, Nick Lentz, and Darren Elkins. Physically, there's some slight edges for Oliveira, 4 inches of height and 1 inch of reach, but Edgar has beaten bigger opponents all of his career, so that shouldn't be much of an issue in this fight. We're all very familiar with what Frankie brings to the table. NCAA Division I All-American wrestler, BJJ brown belt, good takedowns and takedown defense, excellent hands, great cardio, great footwork. He really uses that lateral movement. He's a high-output fighter. He just outworks his opponents, and he's relentless with his attack. We saw him do it against BJ Penn, Jose Aldo late in that fight, and Gray Maynard. He just keeps coming back, and he has power, as we saw in the Maynard fight. Now, for Charles Oliveira, people might not be as familiar with him. I predicted him a number of times and had some success. He's a well-rounded fighter. He's very lethal on the mat. BJJ black belt, 9 wins by submission with names like Jonathan Brookins, Eric Wisely, Efrain Escudero, and Darren Elkins at 155, all falling by submission. And he also tapped out Nick Lentz until that bout was ruled a no contest due to an illegal strike. Statistically, Oliveira averages 2.43 takedowns at 35%. He's very creative with his takedown attempts. He bounced off the cage against Escudero in a match. He was having a little bit of trouble getting the fight to the ground, but he's able to pull it off. He will pull guard. He's very tricky in all situations, as we saw him land that calf slicer against Eric Wisely. And on the feet, he can attempt high-risk maneuvers because he's not afraid of going to the ground. because overall he invites it. He's a Muay Thai striker. He uses lots of movement, good kicks. He has decent hands. 6 wins by knockout overall. We saw him hurt Jonathan Brookins with his hands. But he does leave some openings, and he's a questionable... I raised some questions about his durability. Don Cerrone dropped him with a body shot and finished him, and Cub Swanson also landed a body shot and landed a big headshot that eventually put him down, kind of a delayed knockout reaction, which is kind of interesting to see. Now, I expect Charles Oliveira is going to struggle to keep up with Frankie's high output, considering that Oliveira, he's going to have trouble landing with Frankie, and of course we all talk about what Frankie can put up as far as shots landed is concerned. Now, Frankie also is going to use his wrestling in reverse. He has great takedown defense, and he's fully capable of winning fights without landing a single takedown, and it's going to be hard for Oliveira to get his grappling going, which is essential for him to win this fight. If Charles can get Frankie's back or mount him, it could be some serious trouble for the former champion, and we did see Frankie survive a Henderson guillotine, but Oliveira's nasty. If he gets a limb or a neck, it could be too much for Frankie to overcome. But again, it's going to be hard for Charles Oliveira to get into a dominant position to set up his submissions. Look for Edgar to land frequently, especially with that 1-2 where he likes to finish with power. And I think most people are going to call a decision in this fight, but based on what I've seen out of Oliveira and what Frankie's capable of doing, my prediction is Frankie Edgar to defeat Charles Oliveira by TKO. Now it's time for a main event prediction in a fight I've been waiting for a long time. As the middleweight champion of the world, pound for pound greatest fighter on the planet, Anderson the Spider Silva, 33-4-0, takes on the undefeated All-American Chris Weidman, who is 9-0. Silva's on an outrageous winning streak, coming up a win over Stephen Bonner at fighting at light heavyweight, while Chris Weidman's last fight was a win over Mark Munoz. Now, what is there left to say about Anderson Silva? He is the greatest of all time. We're very familiar with what he brings to the cage, but I'll still address it here shortly. He did say this is a high-risk, low-reward fight, so he knows how dangerous Weidman is. Now, Weidman's the future of the division, but he's coming off a year-long layoff, which is something to consider, and Matt Serra's not going to be in his corner. Usually Serra and Ray Longo are there to coach him, so no Matt Serra. Will that have an impact? Hard to tell. Physically, we're almost even, a half-inch reach advantage for Weidman, which is not normal for the Spider, as Anderson usually has some advantages to draw upon as far as reach and height are concerned. Again, also Anderson's 9 years older than Weidman. Is his age going to catch up with him? Is it this fight? We'll have to wait and see. Keys to victory, neither one are surprising. For Weidman, it's wrestling. For Silva, it's striking. Now, Anderson overall 20-0 in fights ended by knockout. He's got a list of guys he has put to sleep with his knockouts, with his hands, or his feet for that matter. 3.17 strikes landed per minute at 67%, which is outrageous. Even more impressively, 1.41 strikes absorbed per minute at 63%. The guy's hard to hit, and it's hard to avoid getting hit by him. Additionally, he has an amazing chin, so when you do hit him, it's hard to make that count, and he will invite opponents to hit him to show off just how strong his chin is. Yes, he's lethal on the feet, but he has a tendency to clown a little bit. I don't expect to see much of that in this fight, because I think it could catch up with him with a guy as talented as Chris Weidman. Now, Weidman is improving on the feet. We saw him land that lethal elbow against Mark Munoz, but he's still relatively untested. But at the same time, he's an excellent athlete. He learns fast, and he's been out for a year, so that could give him the opportunity to learn and develop even further. One thing he does very effectively with his strikes is he uses them to set up his takedowns. He's an NCAA Division I two-time All-American and a BJJ brown belt. He's competed in the ADCC Submission Wrestling Championships. He's lethal. He has 2 submission wins in the UFC, and he dominated Mark Munoz on the ground. He has a great single leg. As I said, he sets it up with his strikes, and when he hits the ground, he does a nice job of floating over out of the guard and into side control, which is something Chael Sonnen could not do, or at least could not do with consistency, is past Anderson Silva's guard. His stats: 4.47 takedowns at 72%, but Anderson Silva 70% takedown defense, which is going to be an excellent matchup to see who can enforce their will. Now, Silva has been taken down in past fights. Travis Lutter took him down 3 times. Dan Henderson took him down. Chael Sonnen took him down 3 times in the first fight and was able to get him on the mat. Now, Chael Sonnen was able to win 5 of the 7 rounds against Anderson Silva using his takedowns and his top game, but he just didn't do enough with his position and lost both fights eventually by submission and stoppage. Silva's a BJJ black belt with 6 wins by sub, including tapping out Chael Sonnen and Dan Henderson, so he's very versed in fighting these ground-based opponents. He has 2 losses by submission overall, so he can be tapped out, but it's been ages since those. That Rio Chonin flying heel hook was impressive. If you haven't seen it on YouTube, please check it out. Now, Weidman has great submission skills, and they complement his wrestling extremely well. Gracie has had nothing but praise for this guy, saying how dangerous he is on the mat, and saying he can submit anyone, including himself, which, if that's the case, Weidman has a bright future ahead of him. Silva needs to hit Weidman early, hurt him, make him start doubting himself, defend some takedowns, back him off. That's going to be difficult, but still, if anybody can do it, Anderson can. For Weidman, he needs to score takedowns, do damage with the position with his ground and pound, attempt submissions, and show Anderson, you're older, you're faltering, you're not nearly the fighter you used to be, and I am the future of the division. I went back and forth on who I'm taking in this fight. Both guys are very capable of winning this matchup. Obviously, Anderson Silva has the experience edge. Weidman, is still relatively inexperienced, coming off a long layoff. But my prediction is Chris Weidman to defeat Anderson Silva by decision and become the new UFC middleweight champion of the world. So those are my 5 main card predictions for UFC 162. All of my preliminary predictions, as I said, will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. I'm taking 3 main card upsets, plus one of the other fights is a pick'em, so there's a ton of money to be made as far as betting odds are concerned. With the main card for UFC 162. So buy my bet packs, $10, take a shot. They've been making some serious money for some people of late, and over their track record, they've had a good run. So please consider investing at $10 in the bet shop on my website. I'm very much looking forward to this event, and the summer for the UFC and MMA in general looks exciting with the World Series of Fighting, Bellator, Invicta, and ONE FC, all of these great organizations. It's really exciting, and as always, thank you very much for tuning into Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. I'm Scott Johnson, and I'll see you back here next time.